Just 2 days ago, on June the 17th, President Joe Biden signed the newest federal holiday, the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act. What is it? Stick around and I'll tell you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the
Hello, my people. It's your Negro with Aptitude and host of the BLACKboard, Mickee Lee. I see your red velvet, your watermelon, your red Kool-Aid or strawberry lemonade. That means it must be Juneteenth. Happy Black Folks Independence Day! Now, just a couple of days ago, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law, officially making June 19th a federal holiday. Furthermore, the holiday has the same status as Memorial Day, Labor Day, Veterans Day, and yes, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. A deeply revered and eagerly anticipated day within ADOS culture, Juneteenth is largely unknown outside of Black communities. Alternatively known as Jubilee Day, Emancipation Day, Liberation Day, Freedom Day, and Give Us Free! Okay, I threw in that last one just to make sure you were paying attention. Juneteenth has come to be known as the unofficial, official Black Folks Independent Day. Just how free we really are depends on whom you ask. Last year, I produced a video called Juneteenth, 10 Interesting Facts. I highly suggest you watch the video, which is approximately 15 minutes long, as it presents some very surprising and largely overlooked details about the Civil War, the myth of Lincoln freeing the slaves, and the mysterious reasons it took 2.5 years or 2.5 years for all enslaved Americans of African descent to receive the news they's free. I will try putting the video card at the end, but just in case that doesn't work out, I will also pin the link in the description box of this video. Since that video is very comprehensive about the origins and symbolism of the holiday, I'm going to keep this video focused on a very brief explanation of what Juneteenth is for those who are new to the holiday, key myths about how long Blacks have actually been free, and what the passage of this holiday should mean in our fight for long overdue reparations. Let's get started. The term Juneteenth is a contraction of the date June the 19th. As Black folk do in so many arenas, we jazzed up the name and gave it some funk. This holiday has always been easy for me to remember since it is also the birthday of my Aunt Mary. Though now retired, she was an educator as well as our family's historian and Black is Beautiful activist. Happy birthday, Aunt Mary! Though the Confederate Army had surrendered in April 1865, it took 2 more months for the news of the ending of the Civil War to reach Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, hence the name Juneteenth. Now, I want to address 2 of the many myths about the freedom of Blacks in the United States. Many people mistakenly believe that the ending of the Civil War meant that automatic Black freedom for Blacks. Au contraire, mon frère. In English, this means, that ain't the fact, Jack. First, in order to pressure the Confederate States into remaining in the Union, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on September 22, 1862, giving the seceding Southern states, that is, the states that were trying to leave the Union, until January 1st, 1863 to cease and desist. In other words, had the Confederate Army agreed to return to the Union by January 1st, 1863, they would have been able to keep their slaves and remain part of the United States. Compare this to the loyal border states like Kentucky, Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland. All of these were slave-holding states. Since they were loyal to the Union Army, they got to retain their slaves and remain part of the United States. However, the Confederate States refused this offer, so Lincoln declared slaves free in those states. Here's the problem, though. Since the Confederate States, again, these were the folks fighting to leave or secede from the Union, such as the grumbling in California these days, they no longer recognized Abraham Lincoln as their president or the central United States government. So his Emancipation Proclamation meant nothing. It meant jack. It meant squat. It had no jurisdiction in those territories. It did not free one single enslaved American of African descent. It was as worthless as Confederate dollars would later become once the war was over. Here's the second myth I want to dispel. Just as Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was completely disingenuous and lacked any truth, so too this idea that the Civil War was fought to free the slaves. The Civil War was fought to retain the Union. That is, the Civil War was fought to retain the sovereignty of the United States as a country. It had nothing whatsoever to do with the welfare of enslaved Americans of African descent or their black descendants known as ADOS. Then, just as now, this so-called Christian country did not and does not have a heart towards ensuring the success of its most subjugated and abused citizens. Yet, it opens its borders to groups it has had actual declared wars with and gives those people hundreds of billions of dollars to seed their dreams along with social inclusion, even though many of these people refuse to assimilate at all, not even to speak English, and they live in ethnic enclaves just as they did in their home countries. They also receive non-competitive employment, political power, and judicial sensitivity. Or do you educated black folks out there not yet understand what a sanctuary city and state is? What does that mean? It means, where is our humanitarian crisis? Where are our refugee programs, amnesty programs, and where is the anti-black hate crime bill? Where's the hate crime bill to protect black folks? Do you get it now? Moving on. Though the history of Juneteenth is often told in a 3-second soundbite in which Abe Lincoln, our hero, released his proclamation, and within the next few months the slaves were free, so what are you black folks still complaining about? The truth covers a lot longer time period. The Emancipation Proclamation became law on January 1st, 1863. Ostensibly, that meant slaves in Confederate states, not the United States, were free. However, there was no change in their condition. Furthermore, the Civil War did not end for nearly 2.5 more years in April of 1865, though some argue fighting did not finally cease until December of that year. What's more important is federal law did not protect the liberty of formerly enslaved Americans of African descent and their black descendants until the ratification of the 13th Amendment. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So 2.5 more years of fighting ensued before the war ended. To mark this auspicious time, celebrations sprang up under various names, including Jubilee Day, Emancipation Day, and others. However, in recent times, Juneteenth became the most popular as being symbolic of the news finally reaching all of the enslaved persons. That should be a cause for celebration, right? Right? Perhaps we'd better take a look at what the document Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Army read to the enslaved Americans in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865. Known as General Order Number 3, this is what it actually said. The people of Texas are informed, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This includes an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. In other words, though there was supposed to be absolute equality of personal rights between the formerly enslaved and their enslavers, and a new relationship cultivated based on payment for labor, the newly freed were encouraged, or shall we say strongly expected, to remain the labor force for their former masters and would not receive protection from the federal government, like citizens are supposed to receive. And being accused of idleness could result in incarceration. This is a little-known fact. The ending of the Civil War did not free black folks. Yes, legislation produced at the end of the war was supposed to produce new terms of engagement. However, most of the formerly enslaved were actually prohibited from leaving their plantations or other work sites, and their movements were closely monitored and restrained. This set the stage for sharecropping, another form of forced labor. It also gave rise to the convict leasing program, which imprisoned thousands of the formerly enslaved men and women on the slightest whim, most of which was due to false allegations. This system provided free labor for coal, steel, agriculture, and other lucrative industries, and continues today. You mean we weren't free yet? Not by a long shot. Let's take a look at the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment was actually passed before the end of the Civil War on January 31st, 1865, and later ratified on December 6, 1865. You would think that legislation would have been the firepower blacks needed to have their lives matter in this so-called Christian nation. However, formerly enslaved Americans of African descent and their ADOS descendants would undergo another century and a half of benign neglect, though there has never been anything benign about it. Following emancipation, other systems of containment immediately sprang up. These included Reconstruction, during which the Republican Party, the party of Abe Lincoln, the party to which most blacks who could vote belonged, intentionally and punk-acidly, yes, I made up a new word, punk-acidly, exposed their ungodly character and abandoned black people because they feared their white constituents. Then there was Jim Crow, during which a slate of legislation passed to enforce separate and unequal lives while also removing accountability from whites. This includes both Jews and Gentiles for the previous 2.5 centuries of harm done to the formerly enslaved Americans of African descent and their ADOS descendants. Jim Crow ingrained segregation as the norm in most parts of the United States, not just the South, as liberals will tell you. Something like freedom occurred as a result of the second civil rights movement during the 1950s and 60s. Wait, what? The second civil rights movement? Yes, the first occurred in 1865, during which the 14th and 15th Amendments were ratified, as well as the 13th Amendment that I've already referenced. Sidebar here. Because black folks can't ever have anything just for ourselves, despite the fact that we're the ones actually fighting for it, the 14th Amendment is used as the basis for the dreamers. You know, those illegals who have the gall and audacity to mock Martin Luther King Jr. and his dream for Black America and use the legislation to justify illegal entry in the United States. Furthermore, the 14th Amendment, once intended to codify once and for all the legal status of the descendants of the formerly enslaved Africans and their Black descendants, it has been bastardized to grant citizenship to various groups of immigrants of dubious status, which undermines any benefits native-born Blacks receive. Again, I draw your attention to the humanitarian crisis, amnesty and refugee programs, sanctuary states and cities, and non-competitive, culturally appropriate employment opportunities received by immigrant groups, while Blacks are left as unemployed, undereducated, underdeveloped, non-invested into bystanders in their own, scratch that, not their own communities, their own soon-to-be gentrified by an immigrant community near you. Let's continue. I said something like freedom occurred as a result of the Second Civil Rights Movement, which occurred during the 1950s and 60s. You see, civil rights doesn't mean the Black people's rights, though that's what it has become synonymous with. Civil means the people. Thus, civil rights means that many different people, not just Black people, received more rights and access to the American dream as a result of the legislation. The biggest minority in the United States is white women. They were the first to hijack the legislation and use it to improve their educational, political, and employment opportunities. They were and still are the largest recipients of civil rights benefits. That's right, Becky with the good hair has actually received the most from civil rights legislation. Another sidebar. Though mainstream media and the movies portray white women as tough, accomplished, and self-made, the opposite is actually true for the vast majority. Take a look at the Equal Rights Amendment, please. You will find that it still hasn't been signed. This means all of their successes are not due to their own labor, but ours. But what about the feminist movement? What about it? Yes, women got the right to vote. This was a concession made because the 15th Amendment granted Black men the right to vote. Yes, women can now work in various professions and compete on the same playing field as men. That's because of the equal opportunity employment legislation passed as part of the civil rights suite. No matter what area of life you look into, housing, education, employment, social participation, even the right to walk down the street unmolested, white women have participated greatly in the subjugation and brutality against both Black men and women. And they have been strategic in publicly distancing themselves from their men when it suits them, and claiming abuse that is to be seen as being on par with what Black folks, and I mean ADOS, not today's Africans, have faced. There is no comparison. White women have also achieved freedom through us while using us as the labor to bring about those ends. The Me Too movement is the most recent example. Now let's be clear here. I do not hate white women, white people, or immigrants of any persuasion. I don't spend my time arguing about their contributions, but I do deal in facts. And the fact is that if this so-called Christian nation is to escape the full wrath of God, which has already begun, then white women and men and their people of choice allies who have benefited from immigration legislation, they must all take the lead in dismantling the system they have created and benefited from for 500 years. Black people must stop operating in a defensive posture in which we are constantly expected to fight against the system or be contented with a few measly crumbs, all while watching these other people of choice, not color, be handed the table full of goodies that should belong to us. This leads me to my final point of this video: how Juneteenth should be used in our fight for long overdue reparations. Unfortunately, many of the loudest voices in the reparations movement come from the most ignorant, though educated, factions of Black society. Nearly all the major organizations seem to feel we need to reinvent the wheel. No. All we need to do is review what this country has given to other groups. Let me remind the audience once again that ADOS, the American descendants of slaves, or native-born American blacks, we are the only group with whom the United States government has not formally declared war. Yet we are also the only group against which American society has continued its longest waged war. The state of California spends over $25 billion, that's billion with a B, annually for illegal immigrants alone. The federal government loses hundreds of millions of dollars annually in tax revenue from indigenous tribes and their casinos. Indigenous tribes are supposedly sovereign nations. At what point do they get off the taxpayers' back and generate all of their resources for themselves? The United States gives Israel $9 billion annually and other high-value resources, though the Holocaust did not happen in the United States. At what point does this stop? Reparations for ADOS should be set up to aid multiple generations through multiple repayment, not assistance, platforms that include cash. Yes, write that check, and it better not bounce. Land, yes, to create our sovereign states on the land our ancestors fought, bled, and died over. Free education from culturally appropriate kindergartens all the way through university. If it includes critical race theory, so be it. As long as it is our story for once and told through the lens of Black women as well as men, let all learn of the most resilient, industrious, and patriotic of all groups in the United States, and indeed throughout the Americas. It should also include free, zero-interest home and business grants, along with the technical assistance to make sure our businesses thrive and our homes create value and generational wealth. It should also include non-competitive employment in the STEM industry as well as the trades like construction. Yes, it is time that the Latinos, the East Indians, and other preferred groups go home and use their skills to build the countries they are fond of waving flags for. And it should include sanctuary cities and states, as well as anti-hate crime bills specifically to protect Blacks. I mean, ADOS by this. Any African allies we have can apply for residence in our states. The past few weeks have been a whirlwind. The 100th anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre and the destruction of the Greenwood neighborhood, otherwise known as Black Wall Street. The first anniversary of the public execution of George Floyd, and the passage of the National Juneteenth Independence Day. It's been a long time coming, but more change is going to come. I invite all Americans of every background and hue to use this day to collectively invest in real change, not just symbolism. Let everyone, not just Blacks, do their part to increase ADOS employment in all lucrative fields, including STEM, health, construction, hospitality, education, and other areas currently reserved for other groups. Let all take courage and learn the whole of American history, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly, not just the sound bites. Let all create a climate of common decency, mutual respect, and collective success. If this means taking firm yet loving action to stop certain members of the Black community from continued violence, vagrancy, and vitriol, so be it. When Blacks thrive, so does the nation. And finally, let Juneteenth mark the day when all, yes, all, dispense with the idea of what you and or your ancestors did or didn't do to Black folks. I didn't kill any indigenous or take their land. I didn't war with the Japanese, Mexicans, Koreans, Chinese, or anyone else. I haven't killed any Jews. Neither did my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, or other ancestors. However, I have been a working American for 40 years, and my tax dollars have gone to repair these groups. And though I don't agree with most of it, I have not complained. Let reparations ring from the mountaintops, be sung in the valleys, be declared from sea to shining sea. Let all, not just Blacks, demand that the United States government finally and fully repair its long overdue debt to its longest serving labor force and most dedicated citizen group. Let Juneteenth become synonymous with the day that America finally lives up to her declaration that all men and women are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and now provide the cash and resources to pursue those rights. Had anyone told me even 2 years ago that people all around the world would march in solidarity with ADOS and that a new attitude would emerge from a substantial number of white people about present and past injuries committed against ADOS, I wouldn't have believed it. Still, the whirlwind to which I reference has begun. Reparations is in the national discussion. Some whites are seeking substantive repair rather than symbolism, and a few among the people of choice groups are taking more action than just marching. God's word says he controls the hearts and minds of people. It also says vengeance is his and that he works in mysterious ways. In these last days, many of us have fallen away from the faith of our ancestors, dismissing it as the white man's religion. Whether it is or isn't, the God of the universe, who was, is, and forever will be, never forgets even a single scratch against those he loves. We have lost faith, but he is ever faithful. In addition to Juneteenth becoming the National Day of Repayment, let it also be our National Day of Return. Seek God while he may be found. Read your Bibles for yourselves and find out who Jesus Christ is. Let us return to being the people he can count on to lift his name on high and carry him as our sword, yes, sword, and shield. Let us return to dignity and turn away from all wickedness and reprobate behavior. Let us return to all Black as beautiful. Let me know what you think about the new federal holiday, National Juneteenth Independence Day. Should everyone, not just Blacks, celebrate? Everyone will be getting that day off after all. What are your thoughts on reparations? Like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you know when I drop a new video. And welcome to the BLACKboard. This is your Negro with APTitude and host of the BLACKboard, Mickee Lee, signing off. Look forward to seeing you again.